Well, welcome everyone. This is Mike Dotterer, and you are on the dot, and we are on the dot with probably, I would say, to date, the most proficient, knowledgeable, um, someone that's received, accolades, has achieved the highest that when I look at his background in the corporate world, he has been there, done that. And as you can see from my background, his book, I think it's a treatise on going into the workforce or going to work with any organization. You definitely want to read Professor Carter Cass's book called The Right and Wrong Stuff. And I'm just going to briefly introduce, and I call him Professor Cass. He'll probably say, just call me Carter. We were classmates on the farm at Stanford. We lived next to each other. He was in the Phi Delta fraternity, and he was a swimmer on the swim team. And I was in the Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity right next door, and I was a football baseballer. So we were both athletes at Stanford, and he went on to an illustrious business career and got his MBA from the Kellogg School of Management, where he now teaches. And I have just a few notes that I'm going to read. And his time, and the purpose of this is for him to share his knowledge and his expertise. So let me just read to you, and I'm sure he'll be embarrassed because he's a very humble guy. I've been reading his book, and it's a great book. Before I introduce him, I want to especially thank our Stanford classmate, Tom Cohn, for reuniting me with Professor Cass, with Carter. And I also want to thank Professor Cass' assistant, Jamie Gray, for coordinating today's On the Dot. Carter Cass is the Michael S. and Mary Sue Shannon Clinical Professor of Entrepreneurship, which I love because I feel like I'm an entrepreneur and I'm just so excited. It's almost like going to class, and we're gonna only talk about for 30 minutes, but I want to get him back on the dot because there's so much knowledge that he can share with the world. And again, the book, you want to order the book, and you can see below. If you want to know more about Professor Cass, just go to his website, cartercass.com, and you can order the book and you can learn about Carter, and you'll come to the same conclusion that I did. I should have read this, and he hadn't written it then, but I wish I had read this book 40 years ago before I entered the workforce. It's a must read. He's also an operating partner at Pritzker Group Venture Capital, and he's a senior advisor at Pritzker Group Private Capital. He was the former CEO, now get this, of Walmart.com. Carter is a heavyweight. Professor Cass is a heavyweight. Walmart.com, I love that. He was also the founding chief marketing officer of Blue Nile. And I asked my cousin a few days ago, I said, have you ever heard of Blue Nile? And she said, yeah, I ordered diamonds from them. So he was the founding chief marketing officer of Blue Nile, which many of you probably heard of. He also was the director of marketing at Frito-Lay, which I've had a lot of those chips. And in his book, he talked about one of his dips that didn't make it to the marketplace, but I hope maybe he'll talk about it because I hope it's on the marketplace because I want to buy it. It was a great dip that he came up with. And then his team developed the Tostitos scoops, those scoops Tostitos, which I think are still out there. I love those. And Carter, he's received so many awards. I could go on and on and on. He sits on the board of the Kellogg Company, which is a New York Stock Exchange company. It's under the symbol K. And his book is amazing. As I said, you can see it right back in my background here. His specialties are talent development, career management, general management, marketing, e-commerce, retail, and business strategy. And Carter, I have some great companies for you because you're someone that I can't wait to network with. And again, the book is The Right and the Wrong Stuff. And as we know, the there was a great movie called The Right Stuff. Well, this is The Wrong Stuff, and it's a provocative and candid look into the rules and rituals of corporate life that vividly illustrate how and why so many talented, experienced, and credentialed people like myself have fallen by the wayside. And as I'm reading this book, I said to myself, "Oh, I made that mistake. I did that. I did this." And it's a great book, and it's not over till it's over. And so, Carter, I'm going to ask you, Professor, maybe I can be a virtual mentor for me, because I need your help. And more importantly, this book explains exactly what you can do to avoid being one of the people that get knocked out of whatever your track is. And we call it derailment. And it doesn't happen to the other person. Nearly 2/3 of all managers and leaders will derail at some point in their career. And that means being fired, demoted, or perhaps worst of all, plateaued, and you never got to the point to the level or reached the goal that you wanted to reach. So this book, by the way, I downloaded it on my Kindle, but it should be priced at $100 plus, because it's a book that has so much value. But as you can see, it's not $100. So I guess the first question I want to ask Professor Cast, because personality plays a role, and he mentions in his book Myers Briggs, and that's, if any of you know, I've been obsessed with Myers Briggs, and we developed a company called Zodian.com. So the first question I want to ask Professor Cast, and here he is. Hello, Professor.
Good to be here, Mike. Thank you for the warm and kind introduction.
Well, I just have to ask you this first question, and then I'm going to be quiet, because I'm going to feel like I'm at Stanford and sitting in maybe Memorial Auditorium, and you're up on stage. But the first question I just want to ask you, do you know what your Myers Briggs typology is?
I think I'm an INFJ.
Wow. Well, just to let everybody know, the INFJ is the best at strategy, the best, in my opinion. So with that, Professor Cast, take it away. Thank you so much for joining me on the dot.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, if you like these assessments, I'll tell you one that is very popular amongst the tenured professors. It's called OCEAN, or the Big Five, or the Five Forces. And it's research developed. So a lot of the professors have a lot of confidence in it as a personality assessment tool. So it's OCEAN. That's an acronym, if I get these right. O is for openness to experience. C is for conscientiousness. E is for extroversion versus introversion. A is for agreeability. And N is neuroticism, degree of neuroticism. So it is one of the most sound assessment tests that people take to look at their personalities and understand them. I like it. And I actually looked at entrepreneurs' personalities in taking OCEAN versus corporate managers, if there was a difference between the two. And I looked at research on this, and not surprisingly, one of the biggest differences with entrepreneurs, people that have that entrepreneurial profile, is they are low on agreeability, which is probably why they end up becoming entrepreneurs. Their score on agreeability is down. Very open to experience, open-minded, like to test and try things, are curious, always asking questions. So that's why they probably achieve as entrepreneurs. But if you haven't looked at that assessment tool, it's a good one.
I will definitely take that down. I love assessment tests, and because there's a famous Greek aphorism, which I'm sure familiar with: know thyself.
Know thyself. The book I wrote could probably be summarized as that, Mike. The number one reason people derail. And I was curious, why do talented people derail? I had come across somebody from my past who was smarter than I, incredibly quick. And I caught up with this person 15 years after I'd run into them. And I was surprised that the person didn't make as much progress in his career as I thought he would or he thought he would. And I hung up the phone from this conversation and I wrote on a sticky note. I wrote on a sticky, what impedes the progress of talented people? And I was so curious about it that I ended up doing several years of research around why talented people end up plateauing or derailing, as you talked about earlier today. And the number one reason is low self-awareness. They impede their own progress by their behavior. They don't listen well. You know, they're about themselves and they're not about others. And so people don't want to work with them because they only promote themselves in their career. And the whole know thyself becomes really the cornerstone of the book, which is if you understand your derailment tendencies and your interpersonal frailties, vulnerabilities, you can then manage around them or improve them. But if you don't know them, you're never going to get any better. So you said it all right there with that aphorism.
Well, I took copious notes and I'm still reading. I'm a slow reader. So I'm actually only at 2/3 away through the book, but there are so many gems of experiences that you've had in your business career and now as a professor at Kellogg School and as a venture capitalist. What are some of the three gems that you would, for people out there that are struggling to achieve their goals, whatever organization, what would be three things that you think could really make a difference in their life?
Irrespective of level, whether you're an assistant manager or a coordinator or you're an executive vice president or a C-suite executive, irrespective of level, research shows that the number one determinant in career progress is learning agility. So staying curious, having that beginner's mindset, always asking questions, wanting to experiment and do research, having good observational skills, networking with smart people to keep learning, that skill of learning agility, and most importantly, staying open-minded so that you're open to constructive criticism, you're open to feedback. That learning agility is probably the number one advice I would give people, probably number two. Number one being self-awareness. Try to understand your own profile, your strengths, your weaknesses, your areas of vulnerability, your frailties, and your motives. I'll talk about motives in a second. So, number one, become as self-aware as possible so you know what you need to work on and you leverage your strengths. You put yourself in positions to exploit the areas that you're strong in. And then secondly, learning agility, staying curious and open-minded so you continue to develop. And then I'd say the last thing, Mike, you said three, would be people that do well in their careers, they're learning agile and they are self-aware. And the third thing that they do very, very well is they're able to enlist the support of others, to bring others along with them by listening, by being a good partner. But, St. Francis of Assisi said, seek to understand before being understood. Seek to understand the other person's perspective. So, having empathy and listening to others and being good at enlisting their support, business is obviously a team sport. So people that are individualistic by nature do well for a while, and then the complexities of business, they're so multi-functional and so interdependent. People that are for sort of individualistic end up flaming out at some point because you've got to be able to enlist the support of other people. So those are the three things I'd say. I would love, Mike, to talk about motives. One of the things in doing the research of the book that really struck me, it's not surprising, but it's so powerful. People that do well in their careers tend to love what they do. So they are in a career, they've chosen a career path that gives them natural energy. So understanding your own motives, I would say to a young person, in the early stages of their career, or even people mid-career, do things that give you energy because, you do them better and you stay curious and you stay interested in that area. So my career took a sort of interesting turn when I was 47 and I realized that I prefer developing people and coaching more than I did of just hitting my numbers on the P&L every week. And when I finally realized I really want to do things that are more mentoring and coaching oriented, and I took a left turn and started becoming a professor and a consultant in venture capital. And I just find that the last decade, I have a bounce in my step, and I enjoy what I do every day. So understanding your motives, what are you driven by? Are you driven by autonomy? Are you driven by partnerships and teamwork? Are you driven by purpose? You want to work in clean tech, or you want to work in medical care, or you want to work in AI, applied data. What do you love doing, and how can you work your way into a career that leverages your natural areas of interest?
Wow. It's interesting that you mentioned this, because the last job I just had, I wrote a note when I said that I must depart. I wrote a note to the head of the company, and I said, it's critical for me to love what I do, but also to work with people that love what they do. And I got to ask you, Carter, I Googled it, or DuckDuckGo'd it. How many people out there, what's the percentage of people that love what they do? And it was, I was surprised. It's what, about 30%? I mean, 70% of the people. And Carter, what can we do to change that? Because that's what you're, trying to get your students at Kellogg and business leaders all over the world. What can we do to change that so that people come to work and they love what they do?
Yeah, that's a great stat. I've looked at Gallup research that 25% of people in positions in management are motivated highly by what they do. 25%, 75% are either blah or unmotivated. So you hit the nail on the head. I would love to see in primary school, high school, or even early in college, more courses and more counseling around career. What does a policeman do? What do accountants do? What does an account manager do? What does a structural engineer, an industrial engineer do? What do electrical? Understanding different types of professions or different types of vocations, what sort of skills are required, I think. And then understanding yourself, taking these assessments that you talked about and trying to kind of merge the two. What do these jobs entail? And what skills or natural talents do I have? And what's a good fit for me? I don't know about you, Mike. I was at Stanford. I was, I don't know, sophomore, junior. I still had no clue what I wanted to do. I had no understanding when I left the farm what I was going to do with my life. And I had very little counsel on that. So I spent a lot of my time, probably thousands and thousands and thousands of hours counseling students on taking their talents and their skills and their interests and figuring out what that leads to in terms of career. So I think you're right. It's a real opportunity. And I think it starts with understanding self. So taking some of these assessments, understanding what your value system is. What do you value in life? What is important to you? And how can you bring those values into the work you do? That's the name of the game to me.
Absolutely. And, I just had an epiphany, Carter. There's an organization called the Players NIL. And as a former student athlete like yourself, you were a swimmer, I was a baseball footballer, I would love to connect you with the founder of the Players NIL. And you know what NIL is? It's name, image, and likeness, because they have a curriculum that they're going to put together, a faculty, and your book should be required reading for any young student athlete. I mean, it's just, I'm so excited to share this. So we only have 8 minutes left, because we want to make sure, because I know you got another appointment obligation. So what we do on the dot is you get to have the last word. I don't want you to hang up, but you get the, when you finish closing up your message. Just stay online but I'll hit the end of the broadcast. But I think, for all the people that are listening out there, we're streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and for some reason LinkedIn wouldn't allow us, but we'll get it put up on LinkedIn. Is there something where are we going? Because our economy is shifting, and there's so much going on right now in the world. I think it's, in my lifetime, it potentially is one of the most tumultuous times of my life. And I don't know if you feel the same. What's your advice where we're headed? And again, you get the last word. And Carter, thank you so much. And one request, can we have you back on the dot?
Oh, I'd be happy to come on and talk about entrepreneurship, Mike. If you'd have me, that's what I do for a living. I teach classes in leadership and entrepreneurship. Your comment about the economy or even the political environment. It's what happened to listen. I talked about listening and empathy. What happened to that? I mean, it used to be Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill would sit there and go have a beer and horse trade and talk. Dwight Eisenhower didn't know if he wanted to be a Democrat or a Republican. He ran as a Republican, but some of his closest advisors were Democrats when he was the president. Whatever happened to that? It's troubling. I was a poli-sci history major, Mike. My advisor was Condi Rice when I was at Stanford, and I studied Soviet foreign policy and comparative politics. It just frightens me to see this level of disregard for the other person's opinion. So I think, us getting involved at the local level is probably what you can do best. But I would say in terms of the economy, inflation is raging, obviously. It's the highest it's ever been in 40 some years. Supply chain issues continue to plague the companies I work with. This is no surprise, but what we're advising the companies that we work with in our portfolio at Pritzker Group is, be really, really careful right now. Control your, selling general administration costs. Try to lock in as many prices as you can. Try to control your spending as much as possible. And if you're looking for a job, usually at times like these, companies that have really good value propositions, they offer a needed service, they have a good price value component, they usually chug along through bad economic conditions. So, if you're out there looking for a job, working in companies that have strong price value relationships for the customer, they usually do well in tough times. And usually what takes a hit are luxury products and luxury services that are non-essential. So, if you're looking for a job, I would say for the next couple of years, look for jobs that have great price value propositions. And if you're out there running a company or involved in a company, do all you can to control your costs right now, because revenue is going to be harder to come by. Because generally, if we're going to go into a recession, people start pulling back because of inflation that's happening right now. So, that is a little bit of doom and gloom, but we'll get, Mike, you and I've been through these. We've been through one in mid 80s, 2001. I was working when the dot-com bubble burst. And then 2008, I was running a company when we had that terrible situation. And you get through these things, but you do have to tighten your belt.
Thank you, Carter. And as you know, there's always, I remember when I worked at the United Nations, and I remember speaking with the Chinese ambassador, and the Chinese symbol for crisis. And I would say, we are, in a crisis situation. The Chinese symbol, half the symbol is danger, but the other half is opportunity. And you should actually, as far as the last word, you get the last word. What are the great opportunities out there for people?
Oh my, well, if you're investing, the market, the valuations of what we saw when we were looking at investing companies, the multiples, we'll look at a company and look at its multiple on its profit, its EBITDA. And the valuations and the things that we looked at in tech were like 25 times forward year EBITDA. That's what we would have to pay. Something that was valued at 25 times forward year EBITDA. Wow. Well, now the valuations are coming back down to earth. We're seeing, 15 times forward year EBITDA, 12 times forward year EBITDA. So we're seeing this correction. So if you're somebody that invests in the market, now's a good time to, I think now's a good time to look at companies that have strong value propositions. And my guess is that the stock or the valuation of these companies has come back down to earth versus where it was, say, 2 years ago. So it is a good time, I think, for people to be more aggressive in investing if you invest in an area that you understand. And if you're a worker, you have much more flexibility than we all do. We're sitting here doing this from the comfort of our homes or in our local office, and we don't have to commute as much as we used to. But I would just say, focus on delivering value. And as long as you deliver, it's so straightforward. As long as you deliver value to the customer, they usually keep buying your products. So go into an industry, pursue an area that has a strong value proposition, meaning that you deliver on an unmet consumer need, some sort of an unmet need with a differentiated advantage versus your competitors in an area that the customer cares about. So do your homework. If you're looking for a job, make sure you ask a lot of questions about the company's value proposition, and make sure the people that you're interviewing with can explicitly tell you where this company is advantaged versus its competitive reference set. If the advantage is there, the company's probably going to chug along through this tough economy.